I'm Peter Fiekowski. I'm the founder of the Foundation for Climate Restoration, as well as Methane Action, the Stable Planet Alliance. I helped found Blue Dot Change and the new Climate Restoration Governance Group.
What led you to get involved with these companies? What was the path that you took?
Well, it was for all of them, it was a matter of establishing the companies. And I can do it, okay. With all of them, it was a matter of establishing the groups. And it started out with 20 years ago, I wrote a mission statement on my office wall, which says that my mission in life is to leave a world that we are proud of to our children. And when I was somewhat younger, I was working on poverty reduction as a volunteer, in addition to my technical work. And I thought that would be a good contribution to my children, to our children. And by 2010, I was very clear that that was going to fail if we didn't deal successfully with the climate. And so I took on getting the things going that would restore the climate so that it could leave a world that we're proud of for our kids.
When did it become apparent to you that just reduction of output wasn't the answer, that it really needed to go further into actual reduction?
Well, it was
restoration. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So really, realizing that it wasn't just a matter of reducing emissions was very clear when I was a freshman in college at MIT in 1973. And this was the beginning of the Arab oil embargo, and the Club of Rome report on limits to growth had just come out. And they were talking about, well, we should stabilize the population, we should stabilize the CO2. And it was clear to me as an 18-year-old that that was not good enough, that we were already suffering from severe pollution, from severe overpopulation in a lot of the world. And I did not understand why people were resigned to stabilizing rather than having a sustainable population and a sustainable climate. So it was clear to me when I started college.
Just go a bit deeper on that, just the connection between, again, stating the obvious, the connection between stabilizing the population and stabilizing the planet's environment.
Yeah, well, it's easy for me to say now that the climate problem is essentially a population problem. That our global population now is 10 times what the very stable levels we had for 10,000 years, during which our humanity developed agriculture and our civilization. And if we increase the child survival rate from about 1/3 to 95% now. 95% of all children who are born globally survive towards adulthood. And but when we tripled the survival rate, we didn't cut the birth rate correspondingly, and that's how we ended up with 10 times more people than had been stable for thousands of years. And if we had, then even at our current emissions per person, with all the coal being burned and all the oil, CO2 levels would be way in the safe level. We would not be talking about climate. Now, we would be switching over to clean energy anyway, because the health effects of burning coal and burning diesel are very severe, much more severe than almost anybody knows. But the climate issue is purely, originally a population issue.
Why do you think there's such a blind spot with society when it comes to addressing that in particular population?
Well, population, obviously has something to do with sex, and sex is people are very inauthentic. We behave one way. Many of us think about sex, and maybe all of us do. But of course, we don't talk about it hardly at all. And so it's very difficult to talk about anything having to do with sex. And of course, having children has something quite a bit to do with sex. And I think that's why we've never had a serious conversation about it. And you know, most societies now are patriarchal, but historically it was more matriarchal, and so you get this power dynamic, and people blame the other person or the other type of person for whatever it is you don't like. And again, all of that blends into not being serious about population.
As far as restoration is concerned, when you set off on this path, what were the initial responses that you got to that?
I've always had positive responses. In the scientific community, there's an implied response that it's not possible.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you start that again?
Yeah.
Saying I've always had a positive response to
Yeah.
restoration.
Right. I've always had a positive response to restoration. The scientific community has had an implied negative response, which is that it's probably impossible. And the evidence for that is if it were possible, we would be doing it, wouldn't we? Now, that's not very compelling logic, but that is the main reason that people give me for pushing back a little bit.
And what's changed about that? Because obviously you've progressed over the years with these organizations. What's the general resistance that you come up against these days?
What's turned things around is this sort of a psychological aspect that if everyone is doing something, then we do it. And so, eating meat. When I was a kid, I didn't like eating meat because it seemed like a terrible thing to do, to kill something and then eat it. But everyone does it, and we get used to it. Then some people become vegetarians and vegans. And so by